Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Uh, the the film Silk Road, of course, is based on true events, um, but you've also added a little bit of lightness to it. It's not just a cops after some guy film. It's very human. Was that from the get go? Did you want that kind of feeling?
Well, I think, for me, I'm interested in characters that have a strong internal conflict, and I think it's whenever you can, it's great to inject some levity into these crime stories, right? Because you're taking people into a dark universe where people are doing, sometimes reprehensible deeds, and so wherever you can leaven it with a laugh, I think it's a win, and but I guess more than the laugh, I think for me, it's about the humanity of the characters because all of them are people that are fascinating to me in some fundamental way. And it's precisely those internal conflicts and the turmoil that makes them most compelling for me.
Yeah, and I never want to compare one movie to another, but there is this feeling of cat and mouse, and maybe somebody who's not quite in their field of expertise yet. And it reminded me a little bit of Catch Me If You Can, uh, in the fact that you've got this guy going after this new crime, and he's at his wits' end trying to catch up.
Well, yeah, I mean that in the design of the film, I think it was here you have these two characters that are on these opposing arcs, right? They're like two missiles that have been launched at one another, and you're waiting for the impending kind of collision between them. And for me, that was the fundamental dramatic tension of it. And once I knew that it was going to be primarily a two-hander between Jason Clarke's character and Nick Robinson's character, Ross Ulbricht and Rick Bowden, suddenly there was a strong internal structure to it, and I think kind of a driving propulsive narrative.
Jason Clarke is an amazing actor. I've followed his career, and I think this arguably could be his best performance.
Jason is absolutely amazing, and it was such an honor and a pleasure to be able to work with him. He's like, I felt like it was getting a chance to sort of stand next to this thoroughbred racehorse, and literally from moment one when he walked on set, I just thought, wow, this guy is at the very top of his game, and it was so compelling. He's so intense and so thoughtful, and so even when he's doing very little, he's so commanding, and it was just an absolute pleasure to collaborate with him. I think I can't wait to have the opportunity to do so again.
Was there an audition process, or did you want Jason from the get-go?
Well, I have loved and adored Jason for a long time, and for years have wanted to work with him. So when he was, excited enough to say yes, I thought that's my man, and saddled up with him right away.
Yeah, your cast is very rarely, and I don't say this often, everybody is spot on in the roles that you've chosen. I mean, they really are those characters, and that was a great moment for me as a film critic to go, wow, everybody is so believable.
It felt very fortuitous it was like one amazing cast member after another came to board the film, and starting with Jason, and then Nick, and then Alexandra Shipp, Daryl Britt Gibson, Jimmy Simpson, on Paul Hauser, who's absolutely amazing. Put that guy in anything, he's brilliant. Lexi Rabe and Katie Azelton. It felt like it was kind of a gift from the cinema gods as one great actor after another boarded it. And then suddenly it becomes while it is primarily and centrally a two-hander, you have this amazing ensemble cast around him. And I just felt so grateful to have the opportunity to collaborate with so many great people.
The research that went into doing this had to have been a big deal.
The research is intense, and as somebody who goes back and forth between nonfiction films and narrative films based on true stories, My process is kind of similar in the sense of whether I were doing this as a documentary or whether I were doing this as a feature film. The first step is to wade into all of the existing research materials that are out there. And in the case of Silk Road, there was a vast archive. There was all of everything that had been entered into evidence in the court cases. There were all of the articles which had been published about it. And in the case of Ross, what was so fascinating is he had left these breadcrumbs of his story. He had written his public posts as Dread Pirate Roberts. He had written diary entries, which were on his laptop, which were confiscated after he was arrested. There were the chat logs between DPR and Knob. And so there was this very rich historical archive to draw from. And so I kind of waded deeply into that. And then at a certain point, I said, okay, now I'm going to set it aside and sort of pour myself into the movie so that it feels very personal, and I can put myself in the shoes of those folks and sort of attempt to penetrate and understand it from the inside.
He was a bit of an egotist, being in something that you have to be clandestine about. He wanted people to know that he was doing it.
Well, it's interesting. There is a kind of an arrogance and a hubris to the character. He was used to being the smartest guy in the room, and frankly, wanted to change the world, wanted to beat the system, and for a hot minute there, he was doing so. But it's one of those kind of classic stories of like fly too close to the sun and your wings melt off, and I think that's very much what happened to him. It's almost a Frankenstein story in that regard. The monster, he created this invention, and then by the end of it, the monster was grabbing him by the throat.
I don't live too far from where all this, took place in Utah. And it was, when it broke, people here were just stunned because they couldn't believe that this would happen in such a small little town like Spanish Fork.
Well, that's what's so interesting, I think, about the story in some ways, and frankly, the technology. What happened was, in the sort of weird criminal genius of the invention, was suddenly you had the anonymity of the internet. You had cryptocurrency driving it as your engine, and so anyone, anywhere could be a dope dealer, a dope consumer, a supplier. And so suddenly it was in all of these towns. Suddenly it was in Spanish Fork, Utah, and you have kind of the wheels of the justice system kicking down doors and affecting raids. And I think that's why it was so arresting and scary, frankly, for law enforcement, because it changed the game overnight.
It's such an engrossing story, and the more you start peeling, the more layers there are into how everybody interacts with everybody in the story.
Well, and there's an interesting layer of kind of the imminent corruptibility of everyone. And so it's sort of, as these different characters wade deeper into the story, people all begin with their righteous or well-intentioned motives, but something about the power of the medium and the Silk Road kind of begins to corrupt and dissolve all these people's lives.
In our final moments that we have together, congratulations on Night Stalker on Netflix. It's an amazing documentary.
That was it was interesting. I was doing both these projects at the same time, juggling Night Stalker for Netflix and Silk Road for Lionsgate, and it was sort of fascinating and kind of a weird cognitive dissonance to be dipping back and forth from 1985 to 2011 to 2013 in these sort of respective crime stories. But I think probably in some way or another, at least subconsciously, they cross-pollinated each other.
You've managed to kind of cross genres too. It's documentary drama is not an easy thing to accomplish, but you seem to revel in it.
Well, there is I think, kind of a fascinating richness to the underworld and to these crime stories. In a weird way, I sort of feel like all of my work is like, it's kind of all the same movie. There are different chapters in it, whether it's The 7-5 or Operation Odessa or Night Stalker, The Last Narc or Silk Road. In some way or another, all of these are explorations of the underworld and the thin and sometimes porous boundary between cops and criminals.
What's up next for you?
Well, I'm actually adapting my documentary Operation Odessa to do as a feature film.
Wow.
So that's next in the queue as a movie, and a whole handful of interesting nonfiction projects too.
Well, again, it's Silk Road, Lionsgate. It's streaming everywhere.
Everywhere. Drops on February 19th.
So we'll be sure to make sure people watch it. I saw it, and again, I was blown away by all the performances and your use of angles and cameras, and just the way that you inform your audience about what's going on too is just masterful.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad that you found it compelling, and I appreciate you taking the time and having me on.
Have a wonderful day, and take care.
Take care. Stay safe out there.